The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
When the days were completed for their purification, according to the law of Moses, the parents of Jesus took him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, just as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every male that opens the womb shall be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer the sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, in accordance with the dictate in the law of the Lord. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, awaiting the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Christ of the Lord. He came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, he took him into his arms and blessed God, saying, "Now, Master, you may let your servant go in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all the peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and glory for your people Israel." The child's father and mother were amazed at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be contradicted. And you yourself a sword will pierce, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." There was also a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived 7 years with her husband after her marriage, and then as a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day with fasting and prayer. And coming forward at that very time, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were awaiting the redemption of Jerusalem. When they had fulfilled all the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Someone gave me a little book of inspirational and humorous stories for Christmas called God Winks. And in the book was the following story from a mother. She said, "My 21-year-old son was in pain one day. He didn't know what was going on. He was experiencing this intense pain. So he was rushed to the emergency room. And when I heard that he was there, I jumped in my car and I started to drive over to the hospital so I could be with him. And the whole way in the car, I was praying. I was praying that God would show favor to my son, that he would get treatment immediately, that the doctors would quickly be able to diagnose what was going on and get him the right medicine." The drive over to the hospital took me by the church, and I drove by, and the message on the sign outside the church struck my attention, but I didn't realize its significance until later. I made it to the hospital, and my son was indeed shown favor. God answered my prayer. The nurses saw how much pain he was in, so they got him into the last treatment room immediately, and the doctors came in, and they diagnosed his problem. He had a kidney stone, they said, that had to pass through his system. That was causing all the pain, and I was relieved to find out what was happening. And she said, then I remembered the message on the sign that I had seen on the drive over, and I realized that it had been a humorous wink from God. The message had said, "This too shall pass." Every parent knows that we can't always protect our children from pain. Suffering, sickness is part of life in our fallen world, and to have children, to have a family, means to share in that suffering. Sometimes we suffer more watching our loved ones in pain than we do when we ourselves are in pain. That was certainly the case for Mary, the mother of Jesus. Traditionally, there are what are called the 7 sorrows of the Blessed Mother, 7 events from her life where she experienced significant sorrow. But most of the events have to do with watching her son suffer rather than suffering directly herself. And so the 7 sorrows are the prophecy of Simeon from today's gospel that a sword would pierce her heart. It's the flight into Egypt when Mary had to take her family to a foreign land to protect them from harm. It's the moment when Mary lost Jesus in the temple for 3 days when he was 12 days old. And then there was the moment when Jesus met Mary along the way of the cross, when he was carrying his cross up to Calvary. He met his mother. And then there's that moment when Mary was standing at the foot of the cross, watching her son die. And then there's that moment when he is taken down from the cross and placed in her arms, just as she once held that baby in Bethlehem and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. So once again, his lifeless body was placed in her arms, and she wrapped him in a linen shroud. And that leads to the 7th sorrow, which is the burial. She laid him in a tomb. It's often said that no parent should ever have to experience the death of their child. And yet Mary experienced that intense grief and many other sorrows as well. Now, if Mary had known all that she was going to have to suffer and all that her son was going to have to suffer, would she still have said yes to the angel Gabriel all those years ago when he asked her to be the mother of God? Would she still have said yes to God's plan? Yes, she would have. In fact, Mary did know what she was saying yes to. Maybe not in every detail, but she knew as a mother that, to have a child means to experience some grief. And she knew that her son was the Messiah, that he was going to be a sign of contradiction, that he was going to be opposed by many people. And so there would be some unique sufferings that he would have to go through. And yet still, Mary said yes to God's plan. Her great fiat, her great yes. Yes, I accept everything. The sorrows, yes, but the joys as well. You can't have one without the other. And as intense as the sorrows can be, the joys can be even more intense. The joys of seeing a child grow and mature and make their own way in life and do the things that God has called them to do. It's a beautiful thing to see. And in saying yes to the death of her son on the cross, she was also saying yes to the ultimate joy of the resurrection, when her son was restored to her after 3 days in the tomb, just like he was once restored after 3 days being lost in the temple. Now, in today's gospel, we have another event where Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to the temple. It's when he's 40 days old, and the law said you had to bring a firstborn male to consecrate him to God in the temple. And in this event, Mary is repeating her yes that she made to the angel Gabriel 10 months before. She's saying, God, here is the child that you promised. Look, everything that the angel Gabriel said came true. You gave me that son. Here he is back. I give him back to you. And I repeat my great yes. Let it all be done according to your word. Not my will be, but yours be done. Whatever you have planned for my son, I say yes to. This is how one commentator put it. In presenting her child to God in the temple, Mary was giving God permission to take Jesus from her and give him to us by his crucifixion. Our Father in heaven and our spiritual mother on earth both gave up their own son for our salvation. No human person ever loved another as much as Mary loved Jesus, and yet she sacrificed her son for us. Mary was no ordinary mother. She was the mother of God, the God who is love. And love alone can bear great suffering because it also bears great joys. Love always multiplies both our sorrows and our joys. Both are blessings because both are willed or permitted by the God of infinite love. I was reading an editorial on a website this week, and it was from a young college-age woman. And the title of the editorial was Opinion, Why I'm Not Going to Be Having Children. And it was a well-written article, but it was expressing an opinion that we often hear among many young people today, that the world is just too messed up. The future looks too bleak to want to bring a child into this world. Look at all the problems that are in the world. War and political tensions and many forms of injustice, climate change. And many young people are concluding that the future is too bleak to bring a child, to start a family. And I have to be honest, I was filled with a profound sadness when I read this editorial, because I was thinking, if our young generation, that generation that should be filled with the most hope and optimism about the future, if they're giving up on their future, we are in big trouble. And I don't want to deny the many challenges that we face as human beings as we look at the future. There are many problems that are very real that our young generation will face in the future. But every generation has faced challenges, and oftentimes they've risen to the occasion. Oftentimes, yes, there are challenges, but there are opportunities as well. And we human beings are very funny. Oftentimes we rise to the challenge. The greater the challenges we face, the more we thrive sometimes. It's actually when we are too comfortable and sit around and think about things too much. That's when we get into trouble. And among our children are those who will bring solutions to these problems, are those who will bring healing to our broken world. Now, many people are not able to have children. Many people adopt children. Many people care for other children or teach them. Not everyone's called to have children, but to say such a definitive no to the future, which is what saying no, such a definitive no to family is to say no to all the joys that come from love. It's saying no to that future full of hope that God has planned for us. If anyone might have said no to having a child, it was Abraham. Abraham could have easily said to God, God, I am too old to start a family here. I'm too old to have a child. I'm not going to go start a new family in a new land like you're asking me to. And we read the story of Abraham in the Bible. It's one problem after another after another. He experiences war, and he experiences famine. He experiences homelessness, disbelieving relatives. His wife gets kidnapped by the Pharaoh at one point, and his nephew Lot tries to usurp his authority. The family gets split. It goes on and on. And in the face of all those challenges, Abraham holds on to the promise that God had given him, that you are going to have a child. That you are going to have a child, Abraham. And through that child, you are going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands of the seashore. And that through all those descendants, all the nations of the earth are going to find blessing. And despite those challenges that he knew he was going to have to go through, and he knew his child was going to have to go through, he still made that simple choice to have a child. And look at all the blessings that came into the world as the result of that simple choice. I mean, just look at all the descendants of Abraham. Just name them. Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, King David, King Solomon, Esther, Judith, John the Baptist, Jesus. It's a family tree so filled with fruit, so filled with blessings that Abraham could never have imagined it. But it was the future that God had prepared for him. Here we are in 2024 almost, in this New Year's weekend. The future is upon us. I was watching some videos of the comedian Conan O'Brien this week, and he used to have this recurring bit on his show called In the Year 2000, and he would make these humorous predictions about the future based on what was going on at the news in the time. And he did this all throughout the 1990s, and then the year 2000 actually came, and he decided to keep the bit going because he thought it was funny to look forward to the future, to a year that was really past, and the year 2000, that just kind of sounds like the future. I remember the New Year's 2000 very well because that was the year I graduated from high school. I was part of that millennial generation, that generation of hope in the new millennium that was coming. But I remember also that was a New Year's that was filled with a lot of panic. That was the Y2K year. Many people were saying the computers are never going to be able to change their clocks from 1999 to 2000. So all the computers are going to crash. and we're all going to die. And I remember my mom went out and she got like some canned goods and 5 gallons of water and put them down in the basement just in case this doomsday scenario played out. And I would say, Mom, like we have 9 people in our family, 5 gallons of water, we'll be lucky if we make it to January 2nd at that rate. And January 1st, 2000 came, and nothing much happened. I guess there was maybe a few isolated incidents, but it was greatly exaggerated in the minds of many people. And that's what we often do. It's probably part of our evolutionary nature to exaggerate danger. And the media does it too. The media is incentivized to keep us in a constant state of panic. And I'm not saying that every prediction of the future turns out to be false. We human beings do face real challenges, and we better face them with honesty and with courage. And some prophecies turn out to be true, like the prophecy of Simeon, who said, Mary, your heart is going to be pierced. And that certainly came to be true. Her heart was broken when she watched her son die on the cross. But she also remembered those words of Simeon that said, but your son is going to be the rise and fall of many in Israel. He is the light to all the nations. He is the redemption of Israel. He is the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham and his children forever. He is the one that will bring blessing to all the nations. So Mary said a great big yes to all of that. I accept it all, Lord. The joys, the sorrows, the hard times, the good times. I take it all. Yes, Lord, your will be done. I trust in you. What will 2024 bring to our lives? Probably a mix of joys and sorrows, like every year does. Probably our hearts will be pierced more than once in the coming year because we've chosen to love. And yet we will hold on in those moments to the same hope that Mary did. We will say in those moments, this too shall pass. And I know that as much as there are challenges in my life, I also see the joys that multiply when I love. I see all the blessings of God that multiply beyond measure. And so I accept it all. 2024, it just sounds like the future. But the future belongs to God. So let's accept it. Let's welcome it with great joy and hope.